If you've just torn your ACL or just had ACL surgery, everything feels uncertain. You're hearing different opinions, different timelines. Everyone's telling you something different about what to do next and what you can expect. This video is meant to give you clarity on what actually matters, what next steps to take, and what you can expect at various stages of this entire process. All the things you're going to hear today, the things that I've found to be most effective, helping more than 200 athletes come back from ACL and other major knee surgeries to get back to their sport stronger with more athleticism and 0 re-tears in over 5 years. So what I'm going to break down right now are different stages or different timelines that you're going to experience throughout your entire recovery. Now, these stages are arbitrary. You're going to see different timelines, different stages, depending on kind of who you ask, what your research, that sort of thing. The point of this is simply just to give you different kind of chunks of time that you can think about and different goals to hit at each of those stages. So if you're fresh off of surgery right now, you're going to be in stage 1. That's just the immediate post-op phase. So you're bandaged up, you're waiting on stitches to heal, you've got crutches, all of that fun stuff. This is the least fun and often most painful part of the recovery process. For myself as a strength and conditioning and return to sport coach, this is also the piece of the puzzle that I do not touch. I'm not a PT, I'm not a therapist. This is not my wheelhouse. This is when I actually encourage athletes to go to PT as often as possible, as much as you can, because this is when things are going to be the most effective. This is when they can use their hands to do all the manual work that they are going to do for you. The goal in these stages are really just to get the swelling down, to normalize gait again, so getting you to be able to walk comfortably, and to start to work on range of motion, particularly extension. We're going to get flexion a little bit later on, but we really want to make sure we get extension, in these early stages, because if we don't get it now, it's much more difficult to get later on. And so this stage can last anywhere from the first couple of weeks post-op to the first kind of 1 to 2 months. Again, the actual timelines here are somewhat arbitrary, but it's just to give you an idea of what to expect. Now, again, this is also when I will encourage my athletes to go as frequently as possible. If you're in the US and you have an insurance-based system where you get X number of visits throughout your entire recovery process, it's very common that many kind of PTs and whoever will actually try and stretch those out, because you only get a limited number, and oftentimes it's not enough actually to get you through that entire recovery process. So they will actually deliberately try and slow you down or stretch them out so you don't run out at the end. And while that's smart if PT or rehab is all you're doing, if you have an eye on something like we do of this more return to sport training, something that can help bridge the gap between rehab and training later on, then we don't need to worry quite as much about saving up those visits. And so I actually encourage people to use them as often as possible in the beginning, because that's when they're going to be the most effective. This is when you have the most room to improve. This is when you'll get the most out of the hands-on kind of manual manipulations and trainings and things like that they will do. So we know if we don't have to save them for the end, go as often as they will let you in these early stages to try and accomplish these kind of early goals of swelling, gait, and extension. Get that as early as possible. So once you are up on your feet, walking fairly comfortably, no crutches, anything like that, that's when we start to transition towards this more early stage rehab process, where it is still true rehab, true PT, but we are not just table bound like everything that we're doing here in stage 1. This is also the earliest time that I will actually start to work with athletes and start to supplement some of the things that they were doing in PT. I had a professional soccer player from Chile who came to Orlando to work with me, who was only 4 weeks post-op, still in his big kind of cyborg knee brace, going to PT, but then also saw me a couple of times a week in order to enhance the things that he was doing there. And we were able to do a lot of retro work, a lot of backwards work that was very supported, and a lot of work for his foot and ankle in order to train him again, in order to start to get a positive stimulus, but in a way that was still very gentle for the knee. And so the big goal here is really this neuromuscular activation, the feeling of that quad starting to work again. We want hamstrings as well, but in this stage, we really want to get that quad to start to switch back on, start to fire again. Now, I'm also interested in flexion here as well. These two goals tend to kind of complement each other, but we're working a little bit more on the range of motion side of things for the deeper ranges. And I really want to get that quad to be very strong and very switched on again. Now, for me, this is a stage, or this is a goal that I do not think gets emphasized enough, that a lot of people skip in their traditional kind of conventional rehab, moving straight towards more of the strength and loaded work that we're going to get into next. However, this is a key first step, because unless you have that good neuromuscular connection between the brain and the quad, unless you can feel that muscle working very strongly, none of the loading, none of the strength work that we're going to do afterwards is going to go to the right areas. So a concept that I do not think gets explained to athletes enough is that after a surgery, after a big knee injury, the same way your muscle tissue will atrophy, your quad will shrink, right? It looks a lot smaller than your other one. The neurological connection, the signal between your brain and your muscle, will deteriorate as well. So this is why when you're doing body weight squats and different things like that, even though your leg is significantly smaller than the other one, we know it's weaker, it's the good one that you feel doing all of the work. It's just that signal, you can think about it like a wire, is not very strong. And so we really need to get that signal, that communication going back before we go into loading. Otherwise, you're going to have a very hard time later on rebuilding that actual quad and strength and muscle tissue. So a few of the ways that we do that. The biggest thing that I'm a big fan of here are frequency and repetitions. So you need to do a lot of stuff, not something that is necessarily extremely hard. We're not doing 1 rep maxes here. We're not maxing out the leg extension. We're not maxing out the leg press, but we are doing things like sleds, like isometrics, like short range of motion step-ups for very high repetitions, very often. This is one of the reasons that sleds and isometrics can be very useful in these early stages, is because there's something that we can do with very high frequency, with very little soreness or residual fatigue afterwards. I have all of my athletes doing sleds and isometrics every single day when we first get started. If you are in that 6, 8, 10 week mark, somewhere in that neighborhood, these are some of the things that you can do very frequently, also at a very high intensity. The sled's something you can work very hard, but will not leave you sore, will not piss off the joint, and it's something that will be very effective at starting to get that quad switched on, woken up again, so that way all the strength work we do later on is much more effective. So that is really what I'm interested here, in getting you to feel that muscle again, that mind-muscle connection, getting that very strong. And now while we're doing this, this is also where I'll start to gently work some of the deeper flexions, some of the deeper range of motion stuff here. So mobility, just actual stretches are great, but this is where I'll start to do stuff on the slant boards, our squats and our split squats, where we're trying to work into some of these deeper ranges. However, at this stage, I'm purely interested in range of motion. I do not want you forcing load, trying to go too hard with this stuff. This is where I will very intentionally set all of my athletes up with sticks and with boxes on either side, where they're not only doing just a body weight squat, they're actually doing less than a body weight squat. They're putting some of their weight on their hands, so that way we know we are not overloading, we're not doing too much on the joint itself, but we are just starting to gently work through some of these deeper ranges of motion, because that is something that's going to be very important to us later on. So those are the goals for phase 2. Again, I think both of these goals here, that neuromuscular activation, starting to work that deeper flexion, are things that are not emphasized nearly enough in conventional PT, conventional rehab. These are things that we hit very hard and are crucial first steps that will make everything else we do more effective. So this stage can last anywhere for, say, like 1 to 2 to like 3 to 4 months, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then we start to transition a little bit more into this mid stage. Again, these are not hard cutoffs. These will all kind of bleed into each other. So we will start to make more of a gradual transition, where now we are starting to work on load and strength and muscle mass just a little bit more. So this is where we're going to start to really push some of the weights, start to look at strength imbalances and symmetries between legs, so leg to leg, and then also quad to hamstring. These are some of the ratios and some of the important metrics that you're going to be tested on towards the end in order to get cleared. Your limb symmetry between legs, and then also quad to hamstring ratio. These are 2 numbers that are very important, and this is a stage where now we will start to put more of an emphasis on that. And so there's lots of different ways that we can do that, but a lot of it comes down to things as simple as just ripping leg extensions and hamstring curls. I love 2 up, 1 down variations when you're first getting started with these, to start to restore some of that asymmetry. So on a leg extension or on a hamstring curl, we are going up with 2 legs, take 1 off, and then you're resisting that way down. So we're overloading that eccentric. This is a great way to start to restore some of the balances. And then later on, we're just going to go for trying to push weights and metrics and things like that in order to get the strength and muscle tissue back. This is also where these step ups and deeper range of motion exercises that we were doing previously, that were more previously for neuromuscular activation, for that mind-muscle connection. Now we will actually start to challenge the strength more by either putting you through deeper ranges of motion, loading some of these, but now we're going to start to aim for metrics in terms of different standards of percentages of body weight, are metrics that I really like to aim people for step-ups and for squats and things like that. So before we were just trying to access these positions comfortably, make sure I could move well, not have too much pain. Now we're trying to challenge these positions a little bit more. To go hand in hand, this is also where we'll start getting into lower intensity kind of movement and plyometrics, actually getting you to start to feel like an athlete again. Now, this is another area that, in my opinion, in a lot of kind of PT and rehab, they actually progress a little bit too quickly. I actually progress these things a little bit later on. For example, I had an ACL and meniscus athlete, a soccer player who we were working with, was very behind schedule in terms of strength and range of motion. We did not run him, we did not jog him until around month 5 or 6 post-surgery. So very late by conventional standards. But we'd done so much prep work up until that point that he started there. And at month 8, the end of month 8, he competed in a state championship soccer game, won a college scholarship. So sometimes by delaying some of these milestones later on, it can feel like we're going slower in the moment, but our goal is not to hit a milestone. Our goal is to get back on the field. The milestones tell us that we are going in that right direction, but do not be so determined or so focused on each of these stages. I have to hit these as quickly as possible. No, our goal is to get you back on the field as strong as possible. And so sometimes delaying that just a little bit, focusing a little bit more on the strength, on the balance between legs, will then make the plyometrics much more effective. What I see a lot of times with athletes who are pushed to run too soon is that your single leg strength is terrible. If you have a 20, 30, 40% difference between legs and single leg strength, what is the point of jogging? Yes, you may be able to do it without pain, but your gait is going to be significantly altered because you don't have this requisite strength in that leg in order to move effectively. So if we don't run you and we just build that strength back up to where that deficit is significantly less, now all of a sudden, even though we haven't practiced running at all, you go and do it and oh my gosh, it feels so much better because you're more prepared to do the thing. Now, stage 4, this late stage, anywhere around 6 to 9 months, somewhere in that neighborhood, this is where we really start to step things up a little bit with our training. And this is also where a lot of athletes struggle because a lot of conventional rehab setups are just not as good at this portion. Either the actual clinician that you're working with just doesn't really have a skill set in strength, power, performance, like they're a rehab professional, right? But getting you to actually be back being a high level athlete is just simply not really a skill that they are necessarily as good at. And or the actual environment that you're training in is just not conducive, again, to high level athletics. If you're in a kind of traditional mom and pop rehab place, you've got grandma and grandpa on the table next to you and you've got pink dumbbells in the corner, it's just simply not an environment that's conducive towards doing high level strength training, plyometrics, all of these different things. That's not to say that all places are like that, but it happens often enough that I see a lot of athletes struggle in this stage of like, hey, I'm not broken anymore, right? Like but I'm definitely not an athlete. I don't feel like myself. I don't have that first step back. I don't feel confident in my knee. And this is a crucial stage where I think is potentially the most dangerous for athletes because you are almost where you need to be. You are just dangerous enough where you kind of can start to go try and play your sport again, but we are not truly prepared for it. And this is where you're most likely to get re-injured. Nobody gets injured here because we're not doing anything that's dangerous or threatening or anything like that. It's here when you're less prepared than you were previously when you got injured at your previous 100%. And now you're going to try and go out and compete again and expect to be successful. This, in my opinion, is where a lot of re-tears happen. And this is a big part of why I do what I do, is to help bridge that gap. Because if we just know going in that, hey, like rehab is designed to get me back on my feet, able to get through my day to day, go up and down stairs, like have some strength back, and we know that's their goal, then amazing. Do that. We just have to know that there is a next stage. And for a lot of people, there's a big, I think, gap in this industry of the rehab side of things doesn't know performance, so they don't know how to push you guys. But then the performance guys, the strength coaches, the trainers, everything like that, don't have a skill set in rehab. And so athletes are falling through that gap right there. And so my goal, what we do with our training at the Athletic Transformation Project, is just helping you bridge that gap. That's it, of like, how do we blend rehab and performance in order to keep you progressing, get you back to your previous 100%, and then really trying to aim for being better than that if we want to give you the best chance possible of coming back and staying healthy, getting back to your sport and putting this behind you once and for all. So that way you can just go back on the field and actually get back to enjoying the sport you love and not always be wondering if this is going to be, if you've done enough, and always have this in the back of your mind. So what are we getting into at this stage? This is where the movement plyometric side of things will really start to take a greater emphasis, and we will really start to increase the intensity and complexity of these. This is where I really want to get you hitting absolute top speeds with our sprint work, whether that's on the curved treadmills where you can open your legs up as much as you can, whether this is taking you out to a field and letting you open your legs up for 50, 60 yards. This is the top speed, is one that I think a lot of people miss. Of your 10 to 20 yard sprints are amazing for acceleration. It's good to practice deceleration, but I really want to get you hitting that top speed as well, where you were just opening things up and really just giving it everything you have. When you can do that comfortably, that's a great sign that we are on the right track. And this is also where the deceleration, change of direction, will be a really, really big emphasis. Two of my favorite tests that I really like for people at this stage are a flying 10 and a max decel. A flying 10 is a timed 10-yard sprint where you have 30 to 40 yards to build up to your absolute top speed. So we're only timing that last 10 yards, but you have this whole runway to get going as fast as you possibly can, and then we're timing that last 10 yards. What that is telling me, what that's showing me, is what your max velocity is. Like when you get going absolutely as fast as possible, what kind of speeds can we hit there? So that is a great one to start to tell me where you're at athletically. And then the max decel is that exact same test, and then we put a deceleration on the back end. So it's that same fly 10, and then you have a 5-yard window to hit the brakes and stop as quickly as possible. So it's a phenomenal test, because it's, can you go from your absolute max output, your absolute max speed, to then hit the brakes as hard as possible and come to a complete stop. So it's that 0 to 100, and then that 100 to 0, that is the true kind of most important piece for anyone coming back from a knee surgery at all. It's not your ability to accelerate. Yes, we want that, but the most important thing is your ability to decelerate and change a direction. This is both for a injury prevention piece, right? It's always the cutting that's when you kind of get injured, but then also to be able to get that athleticism back, where you don't feel like you're stuck in the ground every time you go and cut, where you really feel like you have that edge where you can put your foot in the ground. These are the qualities that we're really going after in this stage. One of the other unique things about what we will do in this stage is this is where we will really start to load these end ranges. So we're loading our slant board squats, our ATG split squats through a full range of motion. We're getting you doing Nordics where you're coming back up. Like, these are the slightly different strength metrics that we have within our system compared to some of the more conventional kind of rehab metrics that you're going to look for, leg extension, hamstring curl, that sort of thing. But these are the things that when you can do that, like if you can squat your body weight on your back on a slant board for 5 reps, that tells me phenomenal things about your strength, but also the integrity of your knees, the ability to handle that position under load. That's really telling me good things about what the joint itself can handle, not just your ability to produce force. And so the end of this stage, this is when we're looking to get cleared. This is where we're looking to pass all of our baseline tests on our biodex, our hop tests, that sorts of thing, and where we want you to start to feeling pretty close to normal, or like pretty comfortable getting back out into the field. Now, the key detail with this and then with the next phase is that there is a next phase. The next biggest issue I see with athletes, besides not doing enough here in this stage, is that thinking this is the final stage of the process. This is the start of your return to sport. This means you can start to reintegrate with the team, with games and stuff like that. But if you stop your rehab here, or if you lose focus, this is the worst thing that you can do for your entire recovery. You are putting yourself at risk for throwing away the entire past 9 to 10 months that you just did. What cleared means is that we are good enough, safe enough to try and return to our sport. I want you to be as safe as you can be, as good as you can be. And as simple or as subtle as that difference sounds, it is a huge difference maker in how successful you will be getting back out on the field. This is the stage where your rehab is just training. We are now trying to build on the qualities that we've been developing the last 3 to 4 months in terms of power, deceleration, our plyometrics, our strength work, all of these different things. And while here we are trying to get them to a good enough level where you can kind of go back and start to play, this is now we are trying to take things to a level you haven't had them before. And this is the stage that really allows us to transform you guys, to get you guys back to being better than you were before you got hurt. I think it is this stage, or the combination of these last 2 stages, why we've had the track record that we've had of working with over 200 athletes, most of them honestly in unconventional situations of 2nd or 3rd surgery by the time they got to us, or having started PT but just feeling behind, like not making the progress that they were supposed to. The more difficult cases, these are the ones that tend to gravitate towards us because we have an unconventional way of training. And even with those cases, the ones that are most likely to get re-injured or have challenges in the rehab process, we have not had a single athlete who's completed our entire protocol, gotten the green light to go back and play, get re-injured in almost 5 years of doing this. And the biggest reason is these last 2 stages, is simply just doing more. Now, yes, we have a unique training methodology, the exercise selection that I mentioned with the deep range of motion and that sort of stuff. That is a big part of what makes us unique and what makes us successful. But at the 10,000 foot view, the biggest thing is simply the intent to do more here. Think about your clearance criteria for your ACL, for your surgery. If you get within 85 to 90, 95% limb symmetry of this other leg, which, let's be honest, they've spent the last 6 months not really training all that much. So a somewhat detrained leg over here, you have to not even get equal to that. You can just be close to that. And that's good enough to send you back out to play? Like, think about that for a second. We got injured at our previous 100%. When you were better than you were now, you got injured. You tore your ACL. Now, if that was a contact injury, sometimes there's less things you can do about that, but still. So you want to go back less prepared than you were the first time and expect to be more successful? It makes no sense. And again, like if we just think about the PT rehab space of like, hey, this is a stepping stone, then amazing. But that conversation is not had often enough. Athletes, parents aren't told that. And I don't think a lot of kind of PTs think in that setting as well. And maybe because there's not a lot of people in this space that I'm in, fair enough. But we need to do more. Simply put. And the thing is too, like you've spent 9 to 12 months up here. An extra 1 to 2 right here is something that if you do this right, you can reap the rewards of this. You can get the benefit of this for the rest of your life. That skier that I was talking about, who's had 9 knee surgeries between her knees before she worked with us, did 6 months of work with us. She doesn't work with us anymore. She's developed the skills to be able to continue to do this on her own, but she's been on her own for 3 to 4 years now. And every single day she reaps the benefits of what she did in those 6 months with us. And so you can either have this last 1 to 2 months be something that you get the rewards for the rest of your life. You get to finally kind of put this behind you and go back to feeling as good as you want to be. Or you can slack off these last 2. You can get a little bit too excited to start thinking about your sport. And look, I totally understand. You're so close. You want to start doing all of these other things, and that's okay. But you cannot lose focus on this, because if you do, going slack on these last 1 to 2 months right here sets you up to have to do this entire thing all over again. And that is the biggest thing that I'm fighting against. That is the biggest thing that breaks my heart and pisses me off when I hear about athletes who got injured their first game back. Like, I understand re-injuries happen, like all of these different things, but I think there are way too many people out there who are getting sent back who are simply not prepared and don't realize that they're not prepared until it's too late. And so I'm so passionate about this. I'm trying to speak so urgently to you, because this is the thing that can make all of the difference between having the joy of returning to your sport or the pain of doing this all over again. So I hope this kind of general roadmap is something that makes sense to you. Again, the actual stages and timelines of these are somewhat arbitrary. It's just to give you an idea that, hey, we have different things that we're aiming for at kind of every step of the process and what you can kind of expect along the way. Because at the end of the day, you are the most important person in your recovery process. Do not let this be something that, hey, you want to let the kind of PTs and everyone else, like, they should be the one that leads, but you should be an active, not a passive participant in this process. And so the more you can do your own homework, the more you can be on top of this, the more this is something that you will benefit from. And you can truthfully, as much as this is a painful and terrible, not fun process to go through, I get that. This is something that truly, this is not just lip service, that you can actually come out the other end better for having gone through it. And that is the goal. This is something that's not fun. It takes away everything that you would rather be doing. It's painful. Let's get something out of that pain. Let's make this something that is at least worthwhile, that we can at least look back and say, man, that was hard, but I'm better for having gone through that. So that's my goal with everything that we do, all the content we produce, all the athletes that we work with. So I hope this has been something that has been somewhat beneficial. And if there's other topics that you would like me to go deeper about, leave them in the comments. And if you have questions about your own ACL recovery or interested in working with us, feel free to reach out either in the comments or on Instagram. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.